Hi everyone, it's Dutch Reefer here and welcome to this Focus Friday video. So today is a bit of a noisy video because there are people that are flushing the walls of our house to put new mortar in there, so it's a bit noisy, but I hope the noise cancelling will cancel most of that out, and if not, then apologies beforehand. So today's video will be about taking care of the fish in your tank. Since a lot of people add fish in their tank as soon as it's running, I thought it would be good to make a video about taking care of your fish, how to make sure that their general health is staying okay, to take care of them, things to do, things not to do, things I've learned over the past few years. So let's get going, and we'll see where we end. So first of all, be sure when you buy fish that your tank is running quite stable. So make sure that when you set up a new reef tank, that the nitrates and ammonia are gone from your tank. Nitrite, I need to say. Nitrite and ammonia, these are very harmful chemicals that will hurt your fish, and these are most commonly found in tanks that are fairly new. So make sure before you're adding any fish to your tank that you have tested these values or have had them tested by your local fish store. They're often very willing to help you, especially when you're just starting out and don't have a lot of experience or knowledge about testing your water parameters. Other than that, always be sure to look at the size of your tank and to add fish accordingly. So it's very tempting to buy large fish for your tank or very small fish that will become very large. Some prime examples are some of the larger tanks. For example, this Regal blue tank, or I need to say hippo tank. These start out very small, looking very adorable, almost like little stamps, little blue stamps, but within a year or a few years they will turn into quite the fish. So make sure that you either have the space for it or you have a backup plan for when it eventually will grow. For example, my blue tang has been in there for a little over a year now. When I bought it, it was really small, just a few centimeters. It would hide between the branches of the Stylophora, and now look at it, it's become quite a fish already, and that in just over a year. So make sure that you, think sensibly about this. What's also very important is that you check the compatibility of fish. This is not always easy. Since of course every fish behaves in a different way, so fish can also behave very unpredictable, and all the research you've done might have been for nothing. But in general, you can always look for compatibility of fish, especially with larger or more busy fish. Always make sure to do a Google search, to check out your favorite forum to see if there are compatibility issues with the fish that you're attempting to add to the tank. For example, I really want an Acanthurus lineatus in my tank, which I think is one of the most beautiful tanks that are out there. I have even had one in order, but I cancelled that order after reading a lot of cautionary tales about it, since they are very busy fish, very dominant fish. Even when you buy a small one, they can turn into quite the dominant tang, which can harass other fish. And since I've clearly chosen that my copper band is the main focus fish in my tank, I don't want to risk it being harassed by a tang, no matter how beautiful it might be. So that's a very conscious choice that I've made. Another thing to keep in mind is that your fish need food. Some fish are very easy to feed, and other ones are a bit more difficult. So, for example, when you buy tanks and like the foxface, rabbitfish, these are somewhat more easy to keep fish, since they will also consume the algae that are in your tank, and they will actively search for food in between the rocks and on the rocks. But, for example, the smaller fish like these Anthias, Evansi Anthias, they require a steady food source, so you need to feed them at least every day. I feed them once a day, but it's recommended that you feed them even more. So always try to see if a fish matches your feeding habits and your feeding regimen. There are fish that are very hard to get to eat. So, for example, I've chosen to only buy fish that require food once or twice a day, and that way I can keep my fish healthy, since that's of course very important, because you have quite the responsibility when keeping fish in your reef tank. So another thing to keep in mind is that your fish have enough hiding spaces, since obviously the tank seems big to you most of the time. For the fish it's actually a really small environment to live in, and to accommodate to that relatively small environment they need to feel comfortable, or at least as comfortable as possible. And I see a lot of reefs where the reef structure is very much appealing to the eye, but not that much to the fish. For example, it's a very minimal scape where there's very little rock, or people have only used branches, for example, to create their reef scape, which looks really attractive. But also please keep in mind that for the benefit and the safety and the health of your fish, try to accommodate a lot of hiding spaces in your tank. So for example, with my new reef scape that I've had up since 1.5 weeks, I tried to make it as open as possible. So there's not 100 kilograms or more of rock in my tank, or maybe it's approaching that number, but it's not overly done. But I've made sure that there is a lot of caves and crevices under the rocks, in between the rocks, so the fish can feel comfortable at night, but also during the day, or when they are spooked by, for example, noises, the same noise you might be experiencing in this video. Always make sure that there is enough room for the fish to hang out, and it's better for the overall health of your fish to keep the stress levels low, to prevent diseases with your fish, because stress is a very common thing to cause ick, for example, so white spots on your fish, and that's something you of course want to prevent. So when your fish are in your tank, you've chosen a nice combination of fish. You have enough room in your tank, you have a lot of hiding spaces for them. Well, you think you have created the ideal environment for them, but fish, as they are fish, will get spooked. They can be spooked by another fish, they can be spooked by an external factor, or they can be spooked just because they feel something weird is happening. And when they do, their basic instinct is to jump, for some fish at least, so not all fish, but most fish. And of course, when they jump, you need to prevent them from jumping out of your tank, because a fish without water is a dead fish. So to prevent that, it's either good to have a closed tank, so a lot of people have a very high stuff above their tank, so it prevents them from jumping over the edge. And when you don't have that, it's very good to add a net or an acrylic lid, but some kind of lid that will prevent your fish from jumping out of there. I've learned this the hard way, since my spotted drum, well, it jumped out of here, so this net was already on. I didn't have this covered up yet, and well, it jumped out of this, landed on the net, and that's where it's found its end, unfortunately. So I'm sure there's a lot more to tell you about keeping fish in your tank, but for this video, this is about it. It covers the basics. If you have any other valuable tips, please feel free to comment, and I hope I see you in the next one. Have a nice weekend. Bye bye.